And now I'm going to talk about underlay stitching and pull compensation basics. Now, if you are new to embroidery or new to creating embroidery designs, learning the basic fundamentals of underlay stitching and pull compensation is not easy, but they are extremely important to the quality of your design. Now, many embroiders do not use underlay stitching or pull comp, either one, because they have no idea how to use them or what type of underlay to use for their particular design, stitch type, or fabric style. Instead, they use a heavy density, thinking that this will work, but this can cause a multitude of problems. Now, like everything else that is built, you need a good foundation. And underlay is the foundation of your embroidery design. Now, underlay stitching has 6 basic functions. It attaches the garment to the backing, creating a stable surface and smooth platform for the top stitching. It helps to reduce the amount of give in the fabric. It hides the color of the fabric that will be covered with stitching. It helps to reduce the density of the top stitching. It stops the fabric from puckering, and it keeps the stitches from sinking into the fabric. Now, there are 3 different types of underlay stitching. Each one of the underlay types are all created using one of these 3 types of stitches. Run stitches, zigzag stitches, filler tatami stitches. Now, these 3 different types make up the 5 basic types of underlay stitches. Now, these can be applied manually if you are digitizing your own designs, or they can be applied automatically if you have this capability within your software. Sometimes you cannot get the same result using the auto functions in your software, so you need to know how to apply the different types by hand so that you can get the exact effect that you are looking for. Now, here are some underlay stitching samples. Now, this one right here, this one, that's very first one here, is this your perpendicular or your center walk. This underlay runs down through the center of the column, and it's also called center run underlay. This underlay is used when you have a very narrow letter or column that is less than 1.5 millimeters wide. For that, you only use one line or one pass of underlay down through the center. This underlay is good to use in combination right here with contour or edge walk when you have a wider column and need a little extra lift for the center of the column. Now, in the Pulse software, you can specify how far out you want your center run to go or your edge walk. Well, you can in the Wilcom as well. But this right here, this one here is a good example of your contour or your edge walk. Now, this right here is a combination. This is your edge run or edge walk out here, and then this right here is your center run or your perpendicular. In the Pulse software, you can create as many lines as you want with your perpendicular. You don't have to just settle for one line. You can have 3, 4, 5 lines, whatever you want. And this is especially helpful when you are doing a heavy textured bag, like a tote bag that is a heavy textured canvas. Laying down 3 or 4 layers of perpendicular along with your edge run works great. Now, this one in here is your parallel or zigzag. Now, in Pulse, it's called parallel. It's actually a half of a zigzag. In Wilcom, it's called zigzag. And this one here, this is zigzag in Pulse or double zigzag in Wilcom. And then this one over here is your lattice or your tatami. And the underlay is a low density fill stitch used underneath complex fill or tatami stitches. depending on which embroidery design program you're working with, of course. Lattice is usually used in a combination with a contour or an edge walk, which is right out here. You'll put your edge walk or your contour down first, and then your tatami. This attaches the backing to the garment and gives you a good foundation for that to fill in. And it usually is run at a 45-degree angle or a 90-degree angle of the top stitching in the lattice form. And it helps to reduce the pulling up of the fabric as it's stitching, and it keeps your stitches in good registration, especially if you're going to be adding a border. And it will help to keep the border in the proper place. Now this one over here is a full lattice or a double tatami. And this is a good choice if you have a heavy contrast, such as a black thread on a white garment, or just the opposite. It helps to hide the fabric. Very few designs or letters, even small ones, are acceptable without underlay. Of course, there's always circumstances that can change this rule. And if you're working on a very light fabric, such as a wedding gown, or you're using a tone-on-tone, you may not want any underlay in certain areas, especially if you're going to be seeing through the stitches. For this type of embroidery, you would not use any underlay at all, but you would have to be careful that your stitch length was not too long, because it would pull up and your garment would pucker. Now, what is pull compensation? Now, when the needle goes down into the fabric, it penetrates the fabric, and these are your penetration points. As the top thread in the needle penetrates the fabric, it connects with the bobbin thread, and the two threads connect. It creates a pulling effect. Now, this pulling effect is magnified if you have a long stitch or a stretchy fabric. The longer the stitch is, the more it's going to pull in. And this is also true if your fabric is soft and stretchy. Now, when this happens, you need to compensate by making your stitch even longer. This is called embroidery pull compensation. Now, when you create a design to sew out on a denim shirt and on a knit golf shirt, you want the finished design to look exactly the same, and it will not unless you add stitch length to compensate for the amount of give or stretchiness in the fabric. And you'll find this very evident when you're working with shapes, such as circles or squares. Now, most fabrics require that pull compensation be added in order to compensate for the push and the pull effect brought about when you stitch a design into the fabric. All types of stitches create the push-pull effect, but it's most prominent when you are using satin path stitches or complex fill stitches, and also when sewing a large area. The larger the area, the more push and pull you will have. Now, knits are known for pulling in, and the softer the fabric, the more you will have this push-pull effect. Now, the push or expansion area is the open end or column. Now, right here, these are your expansion points right here, and they're also called your push points. They push out when you are embroidering. And all of these stitch points in here pull in. These are stitch points or pull-in points of your letter, okay? These are pull-in points, these are pull-in points, and then again, these are push or expansion points. On the push points, you bring those areas in, and we'll talk more about that. I will show you more about that next week. And it does not matter if you're working with a letter or a shape. It also holds true with the angles of your shape. The amount of stitch length or pull comp that you add depends on how stretchy the fabric is, what type of underlay you are using, and how much underlay you're using, and then how wide the column is of your segment. Now, if you find that you have a design that you are currently using that does not stay in registration, you might want to try adding to the stitch length on the pull-in areas. And this is done by increasing the number in your pull compensation setting. And again, in our next lesson, I'm going to go through all of those settings. Now, always save your outline designs in your native software format. You want to ensure that you can adjust the push and the pull for the various types of fabrics. Now, in Pulse, that native file is your PXF file. In Wilcom, it is your EMB file. Check your software to find out what your native file is. It's whatever file that you actually create the design in. This is very, very important. You want the finished embroidery to look the same on a denim shirt as it does on a polo. And they will not unless you have added the right amount of pull comp and underlay to accomplish this job. Now, once you have a good understanding of underlay stitching and pull compensation, you will be able to edit any of your designs to work the way that you want them to. You must have a good understanding of both before you can create high quality designs. Now, in small lettering part 2, I'm going to be going into the specific settings in the software and how to adjust the settings for the different types of fabrics. We're going to start right from scratch. And I'm also going to show you how to add a background to small lettering when you have to place it on fleece or mesh, such as a mesh cap. And then I'm going to share with you my favorite backings and stabilizer recipes for your left chest designs for woven fabrics, for knits, and for terry cloth. Now, our action steps. I want you to watch this recording over a couple of times so that you can get a good understanding of the issues of small lettering, the basic rules of small lettering, the underlay stitching and the pull compensation. And then if you have access to the underlay stitching and the pull compensation modules, go into them and study them in depth. This is going to make it much easier to work with small lettering and make it easier to adjust all of your settings for the different types of fabrics. Now, this is Joyce Jagger, and I want to thank you for watching this presentation tonight. And now I'm going to open it up for questions.